Adam, it is another week, another postcard. This time, for those of you who are not fortunate enough to be watching this on YouTube, which, by the way, please go like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube, Letters to the Sky. I have a fine book behind me. I'm trying to feature a different book in my life every week since this whole thing started with books. This time, it's the authoritative Calvin and Hobbes, which Calvin and Hobbes were central to me growing up. So I figured why not highlight them. Okay. Anyway, we have been doing these postcards for a little bit now.
You know
I'm
what
really
I
loving them.
you know
No,
you know what I
I'm
used
not.
as a kid?
I have the talking stick. Yeah.
You
What
have the
did you
talking
use?
stick?
Yeah.
Give me
What did
that.
you use?
I'm gonna take the talking stick. Dragon Ball Z, man. Dragon Ball Z was my
I've
childhood.
never spent the time to get into Dragon Ball Z, but I know so many people love it. I've tried to
Yeah,
watch it and just the animation. I'll try again. I'll try again.
yeah. It's perfect for, like, 8-year-olds to
Yeah.
80-year-olds.
Okay. Good. I'll give it another shot. Um. Well, I think that these postcards have really changed the way that you and I work together, and they've made us stay in touch more, which I really am loving. And if you're listening to these and you've loved them, please let us know because I have to tell you and be perfectly honest. When we just decided to do this, we were just doing it because we thought it'd be a good idea. Um, we don't really know if you like them. And believe me when I say any feedback, good or bad, is really useful for us. So if wherever you're listening to this, real quick, if you take a second and give us some feedback, whether it's a YouTube comment, if you're watching this, whether it is on Buzzsprout, Apple, Spotify, wherever, it goes a really, really long way to helping make these better and improving them. We're this is a marathon, not a sprint for us, and any time that we can get feedback is really, really treasured. And thank you, special shout out to someone from Montana who just gave us a lovely little fan mail on Buzzsprout about these postcards. So we really appreciate it. We read them, absolutely crave them. Otherwise, we're talking into a vacuum chamber. So, in light with that, I just want to set the intention real quick. Um, usually, Adam and I have been doing these intentions privately. We have found there's been really useful when we set an intention for the episode, and I really want if you listening to this or watching this come away with a little bit more freedom, a little bit more sense of ease in your life. That's what I want for you.
Amen. I agree
Amen.
that.
All right, Adam. The hell are we talking about?
Well, we were chatting about different books. Now, this is a postcard, so we're not reviewing a book, but there is a book that really, came up on my feeds that I actually read a couple years ago. It's called The Courage to Be Disliked, and it's by Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga. The book is basically a dialogue between an old man, philosopher, and a young whippersnapper who thinks he knows it all, but is sort of a cynic. Um, and he doubts himself and what he's doing. And this old man is just teaching him about the fundamentals of not caring what other people think, and more specifically, not requiring you to get validation from people around you to be happy. And there's so much more in that. But now, this is not necessarily a review of that book, but just the concept of where do we get our validation from? And for me, I'll just kick it off. Like, so much of being in the medical profession is driven initially by competitive energies. Like, we are it's cutthroat. Usually in most medical schools, we compete against our colleagues for the higher grades, for whatever. We compete against spots in better residency programs, and then we compete for better spots in fellowship programs, and then there's still competition with where we get placed as attendings and where
Were
we
you a
work.
gunner?
Was I a gunner? Was I a gunner? What's a gunner?
A gunner is the person who sits at the front of the class and answers every question and has their notes written in 15 different colored pens live as it happens, and has is like the most competitive person. I'm saying a gunner is a classic Gryffindor student. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, Gryffindor.
Down with Gryffindor.
Are you a Slytherin?
Yeah.
That's funny. You're wearing an S on your cap, and I'm wearing, I guess, red-ish. I mean, if it was maroon and orange, that would be Gryffindor colors.
I but there's you
Um,
have, like, warm light in the background, so if
yeah.
you see that, it's kind of like the gold and red. I think, yeah, you're definitely Gryffindor.
Okay, I've got some Gryffindor vibes. Okay, I wasn't a total gunner. I was 2nd from the front, 2nd row.
Uh-huh.
I did take really good notes, but I didn't, like, answer all the questions because, like, the person who always raised their hand, they just they just got made fun of, they got picked on. I knew a
Really?
lot of the answers, but I didn't want that kind of attention.
Who's picking on these people in graduate school? What do you mean, like, picked on? What is it? I mean, I guess they're still, like, in their mid-20s or something.
I mean, yeah, you're still a kid kind of. You're mid to
Yeah,
late
yeah, yeah.
20s,
Okay. Well, I don't support making fun of nerds who are doing their best in the world.
nerds rule the world.
True.
Anyway, so the thing is, like, it's so funny. We get indoctrinated to compete with each other, and the validation comes from who got the better test score, who got the better residency program, the better fellowship program, the better job. And then, even beyond that, who's getting paid more, who's got contacts to administration, who's got better sway with, pharmaceutical companies or with the
Yeah,
hospital. It never ends. It never ends. And it's this unconscious drive to seeking validation from external metrics. And I think it's worthwhile to ask ourselves, what do we re- what do we need that validation for? Um, and where do we seek validation from? What about for you? I mean, you lived a very different life than I did. What do you think there was an element of that in you?
oh my god, yeah. I think first of all, I think it's obviously very I think anybody has that. Excuse me, but for me, it's almost it's the same feeling but like the opposite. So I was always a B student. Um B not quite C's. I was always B. I was always smart enough to like get by without doing homework. Um but it would be a B. It wouldn't be an A. And I was always fine with that. Um I had when I went to college back when I was an adult, because I failed college the first time because I was too high and drunk. So I dropped out of college after one semester. Um, then I went back to school. When I went back to school, I was again in the sciences. I was a B student, BC, honestly. I found a whole other conversation about the way that we teach science. I
Oh yeah.
found that studying for the MCAT and taking the MCAT, which is the medical school entrance exam, I learned so much more than sitting in classes. But I think I was
Oh,
older and
interesting.
I had the habits already. But anyway, so but when non-science classes, I was an A without trying. Um, I had like a 3.9 GPA in my non-science classes. And but I think, since then I didn't get into medical school. Yeah, I think my life has been I like a lot of aspects of my life. I'm really like in a lot of ways I'm very grateful for the life I have and that I didn't get into medical school and stuff like that. And you and I have talked about that a lot, the challenges that that brings. But I think I've definitely had that seeking approval from others. But for me, I very clearly failed. It wasn't just like the second person from the front row who still achieved all the things. I didn't achieve the things. So I definitely absolutely I have that the same feeling. Just for me it's like okay, I didn't achieve anything. Who am I? I didn't, yeah, I don't have letters after my name. I don't um yeah, I don't have anything that would outwardly signify I've done anything or achieved anything or have any sort of recognition. So I absolutely feel that. And that's something that I've also had to deal with
So
from
where
the
do
other
you get
side maybe.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, in a certain sense, you're sort of, I imagine, forced to find validation not from the
Mm.
external world, but
I
from
would say
within.
that's a great point. Yeah. It's I mean, there have been times in my life when, I didn't didn't have enough money in my bank account to do anything. I mean, there've been times when I really just had nothing, and you really I think when that happens, you really have to deal with who you are and what you're worth, because
Yeah.
that of all things, is, uh, by a lot of us just marked as a huge point of failure, like you've done something wrong, and, I think I think just being faced with it for such a long time, I think that I've just realized that whether I had the money in my bank account or I didn't, I was still the same person.
Mm,
And uh and that's just one example, but it's kind of like your face is your face is in the mirror so much, with what your ideas and concepts about yourself, and then how that clearly isn't happening in the world outside of you, that you start to see that like it's just a story.
yeah.
It's really just a story, and I think that it's for me, I really started to see that my inherent worth is not tied to what someone else thinks of me. I mean, honestly, even what I think of me, right? Because there's plenty of times when I don't haven't liked myself. Um, one of the another author who I really this goes back into kind of what we're going to get to in this next part. I think is one of the authors that I kind of I like. I have a love hate relationship with him, like probably most of his readership. Nassim Taleb. He wrote a couple amazing books, but one of them he talks about getting advice from other people, and he says, unless someone has the life that you want, ignore. You can freely ignore any advice they give you.
Mm,
If someone like for me, like someone out in the world who is super, like A type in the world, not just A type because that's really you can be A type about a million things, but like super go getter about the world and earning, and they don't see the other side of it. They don't see the inner world. Any advice that they give me, I think is if it's about achieving things in the outer world, I might take it. But it certainly doesn't teach me how to be a better person or a happier person. I don't
yeah.
take it as that. And I think a lot of when I was younger, or had less practice with this, I would have taken them, said, "Oh, they have something I don't, and I want that, so I should listen to what they're saying." And now I realize that they don't. They don't have it any
Yeah.
more than I do. And one of the I think we've mentioned it on the podcast a long time ago, but it's worth refreshing. Is there's I have 3 rules for life. The first one is that everyone's full of shit. Just means it's a coarse way of saying no one really knows. No one really has the answers. They have their answer. They have an answer. But even an enlightened being can't make the decision for you. You have to make the decision for yourself.
Yeah.
That's the first rule. The second rule is that the teacher is messing with you, which I know we haven't talked about that in a while. But and then the third rule is unless the teacher isn't messing with you. And those 2 rules
You don't
again
know.
come back. You don't know. You don't know. And so I think the first rule that no one really has the answers, and so I can feel comfortable in making the decision for myself, which I think leads us into what we probably the greater topic we want to talk about, which is getting validation from others.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this book, The Courage to Be Disliked, has so many interesting core concepts. One of them has to do with shifting your sense of validation from competing against the world and then achieving something to contributing to the world, specifically contributing to a community. So you whether unless you're absolutely completely removed from society, there is some degree of involvement with community for most of us, whether it's our work or family or where we live, our city, town, contributing to your community in some part gives you a sense of belonging. And this book argues you can derive a sense of validation from contribution rather than competition. And I would go even deeper, which relates to your point, not requiring you to do anything in this world to feel like a valid, worthy human being. You don't actually need to contribute. You're still worthy as a human being.
Yeah,
And my way to that, and I'm going to offer this to listeners and viewers. For me, I'm constantly aware of the fact that as I see someone else, I see myself. There's
Mhm.
there's an ongoing mirror-like relationship with reality. So if I want to shift how I see myself, namely feel like like I'm worthy, independent of what I do, then I have to first start seeing people around me that same way. And
Mhm.
I actually was doing this a couple days ago here in San Luis Obispo. If you haven't noticed, I have a different background. I was walking around in this beautiful little town, and I saw someone in a really nice business suit, another lady with a beautiful cap and what looked like expensive necklace, and I saw a man, disheveled, homeless, you walking with shoes that had no soles, and I I noticed this very subtle initial reaction of question, what did he do to end up that way? What did they do to end up their way? And then I caught it, and then I told myself, each of these 3 people are absolutely worthy. They're absolutely beautiful human beings, and there's nothing that either of them needs to do to be a worthwhile human being, honored, respected, loved. And I noticed that when I did that, there's the subtle unease in me around, being uh, in this city sort of settled down because I felt like now I didn't need to worry about how I looked because I knew now about myself. I must be worthy. So I make a practice out of this. I always train myself as best as I can to see others in a particular way, specifically in a way that I want to see myself.
Mhm. Yeah. So, what do you think? Okay, so then let me ask you then. What do you think? How do you relate that to? I think you might have answered this, but it's kind of like I want you to talk more about how that relates to your self-worth and not and you're not needing validation from others. Is it because you see that everyone has the same value and that means that you have the same value? Is that where you're going?
Yeah, I wouldn't use value.
Okay.
I would use worth. I like
Okay.
that word, like inherent self worth.
Yeah.
If I can see someone as inherently worthy and specifically worthy of love, right?
Yeah.
Um, Worthy of respect as a fellow human being. If I can see the people around me as inherently worthy of that and not need them and not need to know that they've contributed to society in some way,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
then on a subconscious level, that must be true about me as well.
Mhm. Okay.
My
Yeah, that makes sense.
tendency is to feel I have a very I know this about myself, a very utilitarian um way of looking at the world. I I would rather get a Christmas gift that has some sort of use. I would rather give a gift that is useful in some way, and I have a tendency to view my life in that way. It was I useful to the world around me? Was I useful to my family and to my friends?
Mm.
Have I been helpful? But the trick, the dark side to that is I'm not worthy as a human being if I haven't been of use to someone. I think there's a lot of mothers, having heard my own mother share this, when we became adults and she wasn't useful anymore, her own sense of self-worth was brought into question, and she had to shift her own sense of self-worth from a mother that was useful to her children to you're worthy just because you're alive. You don't need to
Mm.
be useful to someone to be a worthy human being. And that's the point that I want to
Yeah.
leave.
Thank you. Yeah. I think to jump on to kind of add on to that, I think is this idea of, again, one of the themes, at least of what I end up talking about, is the lack of control that we ultimately have. And one of those ways that we lack control is we really can't choose how other people see us. There are people who do so much good for the world, and there are people who have devoted their entire lives to service, and there are still people who hate them,
Yeah.
would think that they're scamming or garbage, whatever those nasty, Words are someone who's, I mean, and I'm not that person. I have not actively devoted my life in some sort of mission to, like, outwardly healing the world, right? Like, I think I have inward, and that's how I approach life, but certainly not in some globally recognized, organization or anything. And it's just we really have, you know, we can do whatever we can and our best to make people like us, have the right
Yeah.
opinions, but it doesn't matter. Someone can still decide that we're wrong and that we have the wrong opinion, or that even if we have the right opinion, we're still wrong. I mean, there's we just don't have control over it. And so I think when I realized that, I started I started going inward and saying, "Oh," kind of what you were just talking about with utilitarianism is, okay, what value do I put on myself? Like, and the values and principles that I live by. Um, and that's when I kind of defined success internally, right? Like, um, watching a video of John Cena. He's such an amazing man. He was talking with a couple of guys, and he was saying, John, he's a movie star, WWE wrestler. He's actually, I don't know if you know this, I think he is by far and away highest ever performing Make a Wish Foundation person. Like,
Oh,
he does more of
really?
it than anybody by leaps and bounds. Like, he does the Make a Wish thing, giving these,
Wow.
these kids going into terminal illnesses. That's what he does, like, and he was saying, every day I say, like, when the sun sets, I say, "Did I earn this sunset?" And sometimes, and it not didn't go where I thought it was, whereas, like, you go right to, like, "Did I earn it? Did I, like, achieve?" He's like, "No, sometimes I did work, and sometimes I just relaxed, and as long as I am comfortable with myself, like, I know that I earned an integrity with what I needed that day, I earned that sunset." And
Mm,
I thought that was maybe a different way than I'd word it, and but I thought it was a really beautiful way of expressing that idea, that it comes down to your own sense of worth, your own sense of worth, that you just can't rely on what other people think of you.
yeah. Yeah, if you live life by your own values, define what those are, and live life by your own values and not by the values of what others think of you. It's so easy to intellectually understand that, and the only way to get around, to get past the intellectual understanding to actually living that is to face that head on, to
Yeah.
face the desire for validation and approval from others, and just look at it. Look at it without judgment, see where it's coming from, and let it go.
Yeah. I think, and I know this has been a long postcard, but I don't feel like I'm done. I think we need to talk about, or I want to talk about, what that feels like. When I go back to, even now, because I'm certainly not immune to. I'm 100% not nearly immune to what people think of me. You think about, what does it feel like to let go? Okay, someone doesn't like me. Someone doesn't
Mm,
like something that I've done. What's the internal feeling, right? For me, there's a sort of like crumbling. There's a sort of, yeah, a crumbling, a breaking down, a disillusionment of myself. I think that's like the darker aspects, where
mm,
in order to, like, feel like I have myself together, like I'm whole, I have to listen to what this person says, and they have to be happy. And I
yeah.
feel, but when I really sit with it and actually just meditate on that, I that's just a feeling like any other feeling. It's just a particularly painful one sometimes. But I can still sit with that feeling, okay, what does it feel like? What it would feel like if my family disagreed with me, like the people that are closest to me disagreed with me. Or you could do a stranger, if you can't even, if that's tough. Like, what would it feel like if a stranger didn't like me? A stranger disapproved of me. And see, am I pushing or pulling away from it? Am I saying, "Oh god, I don't want that. I want to fit in," or am I saying, "F you, I don't need your opinion." Like, am I pushing against it the other direction? Or am I neutral and say, "Okay, yeah, it is kind of uncomfortable." Um, but I have to make the decision for myself. It's ultimately my decision, and I think a lot of good can come from just sitting with that feeling and just reflecting on it and kind of like tasting it and
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
and looking at it from all sides.
Sitting in it. Yeah, and that's amazing that you do that and that you're so self-aware. That's the key, is to have the courage to sit with that feeling, because in truth,
Yeah,
we're social creatures. We like when
yeah,
other people approve us and love us and tell us they love what we're doing. Um, and I think if when that doesn't happen, we have to be honest with ourselves and face that emotion. I'll say that in practicing it, you'll realize you're still there. There's a you that's witnessing the emotion, that's observing it. Stephen's still there. It might appear that things are crumbling apart, but Stephen's still there and watching.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I, there's also a lot of power in being the person to give yourself validation. Uh,
Mm.
Self-talk, the benefit of self-talk. Athletes know this. They talk to themselves. They tell themselves, "You got this. You're doing great." Like, there's a lot of power in that, and there's a whole other topic we can dive into, like
Yeah, yeah,
internal
yeah, yeah,
family systems and
yeah.
looking at the way we treat ourselves. But suffice it to say, be the person to give your own validation.
Thank you.
And with that, sir, we wrap up yet another postcard.
Get another postcard. Well, thank you, Adam. Thank you, everyone who listens. We can't tell you how much we appreciate you, wherever you are, whenever you are. Really, really grateful and grateful for you, Adam.
Grateful for you, Stephen, and all the
Till
listeners.
next time.
Till next time.